I never imagined that the person I trusted most would be the one to destroy everything I had built. But what he didn't know was that in trying to ruin me, he had just signed his own death warrant. My name is Sarah Chen, and for 11 years, I poured my soul into Meridian Industries. 11 years of 16-hour days, missed birthdays, sacrificed relationships, and sleepless nights. I climbed from an entry-level analyst to senior vice president of global partnerships, becoming the youngest person in company history to reach that position. I was their golden girl, their success story, their proof that hard work pays off. But success, I learned, makes you a target. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my world began to crumble. The autumn rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our Manhattan office as I sat in the boardroom, finalizing the details of the biggest deal in company history. The Yamamoto Corporation contract, a multi-billion-dollar partnership that would revolutionize our entire industry. I had spent 3 years cultivating this relationship, learning Japanese, understanding their culture, building trust brick by brick. The contract was more than just business. It was personal. Hiroshi Yamamoto, the CEO, had specifically requested that I be the primary contact for the duration of the 5-year deal. There was a clause in the agreement, buried in Section 47, that stated if I was removed from my position or terminated for any reason other than gross misconduct, the contract would be null and void. Yamamoto-san valued loyalty above all else, and my consistent presence was non-negotiable. I had written that clause myself, knowing my worth, protecting my position. It was insurance against corporate politics, or so I thought. But insurance only works when the people making decisions actually read the fine print. That morning, I was putting the finishing touches on the presentation for the board. The deal would be announced the following week, adding an estimated $2 billion to our annual revenue. I could already taste the victory, the vindication of every sacrifice I had made. Then Marcus Kellaway walked into my life. I heard him before I saw him, that booming, arrogant voice echoing through the hallway. "Time to shake things up around here," he bellowed to someone, probably his assistant. "Dead weight has been floating too long." Marcus was our new CEO, brought in 6 weeks earlier by the board to modernize operations and increase efficiency. Translation: cut costs and eliminate anyone who threatened his ego. He was everything I despised about corporate America, a Harvard MBA with a silver spoon background who thought intimidation was the same as leadership. At 52, Marcus had the kind of presence that demanded attention for all the wrong reasons. 6 feet tall with perfectly styled gray hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He wore $1,000 suits like armor and wielded his authority like a weapon. His resume was impressive on paper. He had restructured 3 companies before ours, which was corporate speak for firing half the workforce and selling off assets. What Marcus didn't understand was that Meridian wasn't like his previous companies. We weren't some struggling corporation that needed a hatchet man. We were successful, innovative, and on the verge of the biggest expansion in our history. But men like Marcus don't see nuance. They see numbers on a spreadsheet and names to cross off. Our first meeting happened by accident. I was leaving the boardroom after a conference call with Tokyo when I nearly collided with him in the hallway. He was shorter than I expected, and up close, I could see the network of tiny veins around his nose that suggested a fondness for expensive whiskey. "Sarah Chen," he said, looking me up and down in a way that made my skin crawl. "I've been hearing a lot about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, maintaining my professional smile. "That depends on your perspective." His laugh was sharp, cutting. "Some might say you've been given too much autonomy for someone your age. Too much influence." The warning bells in my head started ringing, but I kept my expression neutral. "I've been fortunate to work with incredible clients who trust my judgment." "Trust," he repeated, as if the word tasted sour. "That's an interesting concept. In my experience, trust is often misplaced, especially when it comes to employees who think they're irreplaceable." I should have known then. Should have seen the writing on the wall. But I was so focused on the Yamamoto deal, so confident in my position, that I missed the danger standing right in front of me. "Well," I said, stepping around him, "I should get back to work. The Yamamoto presentation won't finish itself." "Ah yes, the Yamamoto deal. Something flickered in his eyes. We'll need to discuss that soon. I nodded and walked away, but I could feel his gaze burning into my back. There was something predatory about Marcus Kellaway, something that suggested he viewed every interaction as a conquest. Over the next 2 weeks, I noticed subtle changes. My assistant, Jennifer, started acting nervous around me. Meetings I should have been included in happened without me. My access to certain files was quietly restricted. But every time I tried to pin down what was happening, I was told it was just routine restructuring or system updates. The paranoia was eating away at me, but I told myself I was being dramatic. After all, I had the Yamamoto deal. I was about to deliver the biggest contract in company history. They couldn't possibly be planning to get rid of me. I was naive enough to believe that results mattered more than politics. The Friday before the announcement, I worked late preparing for the board meeting. The office was almost empty, just the cleaning crew and a few workaholics like myself. I was in my corner office, reviewing the final numbers, when I heard voices from the conference room next door. Marcus's voice was unmistakable, but he was speaking quietly, which was unusual for him. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed my ear to the thin wall that separated our offices. The transition needs to be smooth, he was saying. No drama, no questions. Just clean it up and move forward. What about the Yamamoto situation? That was David Walsh, our CFO. Sarah's been their primary contact for 3 years. They specifically requested her involvement. Marcus laughed, that same sharp sound that made my teeth ache. David, you're thinking too small. Once we have their signature, what are they going to do? Sue us? They need this partnership more than we do. We hold all the cards. But the contract clearly states, contracts can be renegotiated. Legal will handle any complications. What matters is establishing clear leadership from day one. I won't have someone undermining my authority because they think they're untouchable. My blood turned to ice water. They were talking about me. About removing me from the Yamamoto deal. But they clearly hadn't read the contract thoroughly, hadn't understood the implications of that clause I had insisted on. When? David asked. Monday morning. First thing. I want her gone before the announcement. Make it look like a promotion, transfer her to the European division or something. Give her a nice severance package and a glowing recommendation. But get her out of here. I stumbled back from the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. A promotion? They thought they could just ship me off to Europe like some inconvenient middle manager. After 11 years of loyalty, after bringing them the biggest deal in company history, they wanted to exile me. But there was something else in Marcus's tone, something that suggested this wasn't just about business restructuring. This was personal. He saw me as a threat, and men like Marcus eliminated threats. I spent the weekend in a haze of disbelief and rage. Part of me wanted to march into his office Monday morning and confront him. Part of me wanted to call Yamamoto-san and warn him about what was coming. But a larger part of me was curious. I wanted to see how far Marcus would go, how much damage he was willing to cause to stroke his own ego. Besides, I had read the contract. I knew what would happen if they removed me. Maybe it was time for Marcus Kellaway to learn that some people actually read the fine print. Monday morning arrived grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I dressed carefully in my best suit, a sharp black Armani that made me look like the successful executive I was. If this was going to be my last day, I wanted to look the part. The office felt different when I walked in. Conversations stopped when people saw me. Eyes followed me down the hallway. Word had gotten out somehow, the way it always does in corporate environments. The vultures were circling, waiting to see who would inherit my accounts, my office, my position. Jennifer wouldn't meet my eyes when I said good morning. Her desk was unusually tidy, as if she had already started packing up. Mr. Kellaway wants to see you in his office, she said quietly. As soon as you get in. I nodded, setting down my briefcase with deliberate calm. Tell him I'll be right there. I just need to check my email. Sarah, she whispered, leaning forward. I'm sorry. I tried to. It's okay, Jen. This isn't your fault. But as I walked toward Marcus's office, I could feel the anger building in my chest like a pressure cooker. 11 years. 11 years of my life, and they were going to dispose of me like yesterday's newspaper. Marcus's office was a monument to his ego. Awards he had bought from business magazines, photos of him shaking hands with politicians, and a massive mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was standing by the window when I knocked, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline like some wannabe corporate titan. "Sarah, come in. Close the door behind you." I did as he asked, noting that David Walsh and Helen Morrison from HR were already seated at the small conference table. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This was an execution, complete with witnesses. "Please, sit down." Marcus gestured to the chair across from them, and I realized they had positioned it so I would be facing all three of them. Classic intimidation tactics. They wanted me to feel outnumbered, powerless. I sat down and crossed my legs, projecting a confidence I didn't entirely feel. "You wanted to see me?" Marcus took his time walking back to his chair, drawing out the moment. He was enjoying this, I realized. This was entertainment for him. "Sarah, let me start by saying how much the company appreciates your contributions over the past 11 years. You've been instrumental in building our partnerships division into what it is today." The past tense wasn't lost on me. I kept my expression neutral. "Thank you. However, as we move forward with our new strategic initiatives, we need to make some organizational changes. Restructuring that will position us for continued growth and success." Corporate doublespeak at its finest. I almost admired his commitment to the performance. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. What Marcus is saying is that we're creating new opportunities for advancement, new roles that better utilize our talent. I see. I leaned back in my chair. "And what role did you have in mind for me?" Marcus smiled, and I could see the predator beneath the polished exterior. "We'd like to offer you the position of Regional Director for European Operations. It's a significant promotion. You'd be overseeing partnerships across 12 countries, with full autonomy to build the division as you see fit. Based in London, of course," Helen added helpfully. "The company would handle all relocation expenses, provide a generous housing allowance, and you'd receive a 15% salary increase." I had to admire the trap they had constructed. On paper, it sounded like a promotion. Anyone looking from the outside would think I was being rewarded for my hard work. But I knew the truth. They were removing me from the Yamamoto deal and shipping me 3,000 miles away where I couldn't interfere with Marcus's vision. "That's very generous," I said slowly. "And when would this transition take place?" "Immediately," Marcus replied. "We'd want you in London by the end of the month to begin the transition process." "I see. And what about my current responsibilities?" "The Yamamoto partnership launches officially next week." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. "That will be handled by the team. David will be taking over the client relationship going forward." David looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. He knew what I knew, that Yamamoto-san would not be pleased with this change. But Marcus was steamrolling ahead, blind to the consequences. "Mr. Kellaway," I said carefully, "are you familiar with the specific terms of the Yamamoto contract?" "Of course. It's a significant partnership that will benefit from fresh leadership and a new perspective." "Have you read Section 47? For the first time, uncertainty crept into his expression. "I've reviewed all the pertinent sections. Section 47 specifically states that I must remain as the primary contact for the duration of the contract. If I'm removed from my position or terminated for any reason other than gross misconduct, the contract becomes null and void." The silence in the room was deafening. David's face had gone pale. Helen was frantically flipping through the file in front of her. But Marcus just stared at me, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. "That's..." David started, then stopped. "That's what?" Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. "That's in the contract," David finished weakly. "Sarah insisted on that clause during negotiations. Yamamoto-san was very specific about wanting continuity in the relationship." I watched the realization dawn on Marcus's face. The anger, the disbelief, the scramble to find a way around the problem he had created. But there was something else there too, a cold fury that told me this was no longer just about business. We can renegotiate, Marcus said finally. Contracts are modified all the time. Yamamoto Corporation doesn't renegotiate, I replied. They consider it dishonorable. If you attempt to change the terms now, they'll view it as a breach of trust and walk away entirely. Then you'll stay in your current position, Helen said quickly. The London opportunity can wait until after the contract period. But I could see in Marcus's eyes that this wasn't going to end here. He had been humiliated in front of his subordinates, forced to back down from his grand restructuring plan. Men like Marcus don't forget that kind of embarrassment. Actually, I said, standing up, I need some time to consider your generous offer. The London position sounds intriguing, but I have commitments here that I take seriously. Marcus's smile was razor-sharp. Of course. Take all the time you need. Just remember, Sarah, loyalty is a two-way street. The threat was barely veiled. I nodded politely and headed for the door, but his voice stopped me. Oh, and Sarah? I'll be taking a much more hands-on approach to the Yamamoto partnership going forward. I want to be briefed on every interaction, every decision. After all, it's important that I understand all our key relationships. I turned back to face him. Of course. Though I should mention that Yamamoto-san is quite traditional. He doesn't appreciate micromanagement or frequent changes in protocol. I'm sure we'll get along just fine. I left his office knowing that this was far from over. Marcus Kellaway was not the type of man to accept defeat graciously, and I had just handed him a very public loss. He would be looking for ways to even the score, and next time, he would be more prepared. But what Marcus didn't understand was that some battles are won long before they're fought. That clause in the contract wasn't just insurance, it was a loaded gun, and I had just shown him that I wasn't afraid to pull the trigger. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus made my life hell in small, petty ways. My parking space was reassigned. My assistant was transferred to another department. I was excluded from meetings I had organized, forced to get updates secondhand. It was corporate warfare at its most juvenile, but it was also strategic. Marcus was building a case for my removal, documenting every way he could paint me as difficult or uncooperative. Meanwhile, the Yamamoto partnership launch was approaching, and the pressure was building. The board was excited about the revenue projections. The press was already sniffing around, sensing a major announcement. And Yamamoto-san was preparing to fly in from Tokyo for the signing ceremony. But Marcus was playing a dangerous game, inserting himself into every aspect of the relationship. He scheduled calls with Yamamoto's team without including me. He revised presentation materials I had spent months preparing. He was treating the partnership like his personal conquest, not understanding that in Japanese business culture, such behavior was deeply offensive. I tried to warn him, but Marcus wasn't interested in my advice. I've been managing international relationships since you were in high school, he told me during one particularly tense meeting. I think I can handle one Japanese businessman. The irony would have been funny if the stakes weren't so high. 3 days before the announcement, I received a call that changed everything. I was working late again, trying to repair some of the damage Marcus had caused to our presentation, when my phone rang. Ms. Chen, this is Kenji Nakamura, Mr. Yamamoto's assistant. I'm calling from Tokyo. My stomach dropped. Yamamoto's people never called after hours unless there was a serious problem. Good evening, Mr. Nakamura. How can I help you? Ms. Chen, I'm afraid Mr. Yamamoto is concerned about recent changes in communication protocol. He has received several calls and emails from Mr. Kellaway that were unexpected. I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was heading. What kind of concerns? Mr. Yamamoto finds Mr. Kellaway's approach to be quite aggressive. Very American, as he put it. There have been suggestions about modifying contract terms, accelerating timelines, and reducing oversight requirements. These suggestions are troubling to Mr. Yamamoto. Marcus, the absolute fool, had been trying to renegotiate the contract behind my back. He had no understanding of Japanese business etiquette, no appreciation for the careful relationship I had built over 3 years. Mr. Nakamura, I assure you that Mr. Kellaway's communications don't reflect the official position of Meridian Industries. I will speak with him immediately and clarify our commitment to the original agreement. I hope so, Ms. Chen. Mr. Yamamoto values his relationship with you greatly, but he is beginning to question whether Meridian Industries is the right partner for this venture. The behavior he has observed does not align with the values we discussed. After I hung up, I sat in my dark office staring out at the city lights. Marcus was sabotaging the deal with his arrogance and ignorance, but if I went to the board to complain, it would look like sour grapes. He was the CEO, after all. Who would they believe? I was trapped between protecting the company and protecting myself, and Marcus knew it. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Marcus to discuss the Yamamoto situation. His assistant made me wait 45 minutes before finally showing me in, another petty power play in his ongoing campaign to humiliate me. Sarah, what can I do for you? He didn't look up from his computer, forcing me to stand there like a supplicant. We need to discuss your communications with Yamamoto Corporation. They're concerned about changes in protocol. Now he looked up, that predatory smile spreading across his face. Are they? How interesting. And how exactly do you know about their concerns? They called me directly. Mr. Yamamoto's assistant was quite specific about their displeasure with your approach. Marcus leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I see. So you're saying that our partner prefers to communicate through you rather than directly with the CEO? The trap was so obvious I could see it coming, but I had no choice but to walk into it. They value consistency and established relationships. How convenient for you. Almost like you've positioned yourself as indispensable. His voice was silk wrapped around a knife. Some might say that kind of arrangement represents a conflict of interest. There's no conflict. My only interest is in maintaining a successful partnership. Is it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you've engineered a situation where the company can't function without you. That's not partnership, Sarah. That's manipulation. I felt the blood drain from my face. He was twisting everything, making my competence look like sabotage. That's not what happened. Isn't it? You insisted on that clause in the contract, made yourself the irreplaceable middleman, and now you're using their dissatisfaction with my leadership to undermine my authority. Marcus, you're being paranoid. The clause exists because Yamamoto-san values stability. If you would just let me handle the relationship the way I've been doing, the way you've been doing it is the problem. He stood up, walking around his desk to loom over me. You've created a dependency that serves your interests, not the company's. And frankly, I'm beginning to question your loyalty. The word hung in the air like a blade. In corporate America, questioning someone's loyalty was the first step toward termination. He was building his case, piece by piece, turning my success into evidence of treachery. My loyalty has never been in question. 11 years of results speak for themselves. Do they? Or do they speak to 11 years of self-serving empire building? He was enjoying this, savoring every word. Sarah, I'm going to be very clear with you. The way you've structured this relationship with Yamamoto is unacceptable. It puts too much power in the hands of one employee and creates unnecessary risk for the company. What are you saying? I'm saying that after this deal closes, we're going to restructure the entire partnerships division. New protocols, new leadership, new relationships. And if Yamamoto Corporation doesn't like those changes, then perhaps they're not the right partner for us going forward. My heart stopped. He was willing to kill a multi-billion-dollar partnership just to prove a point. Just to show that he was in charge. Marcus, you can't be serious. This deal represents, I know what it represents. And I know what you represent. The question is, which one of those things is more important to Meridian Industries in the long run? He was giving me an ultimatum without saying it directly. Accept his authority and watch him destroy everything I had built, or resist and face the consequences. Either way, he won. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course you do. Take all the time you need. Just remember, Sarah, change is coming whether you're part of it or not. I walked out of his office knowing that my time at Meridian was running out. Marcus had made his decision, and now it was just a matter of how and when he would implement it. The only question was whether he would wait until after the Yamamoto signing or if his ego would demand immediate satisfaction. I didn't have to wait long for my answer. Friday afternoon, 2 days before the announcement ceremony, Jennifer appeared at my door looking like she had seen a ghost. She was carrying a security badge and a manila envelope that I recognized immediately, the standard termination package. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Mr. Kellaway wants to see you in his office immediately." Behind her stood 2 security guards, trying to look casual but clearly there for a purpose. The message was clear: this wasn't a meeting, it was an execution. I looked around my office one last time, taking in the awards, the photos, the evidence of 11 years of my life. Then I picked up my purse and walked toward what I knew would be my final meeting at Meridian Industries. Marcus was waiting with his usual supporting cast: David, Helen, and now the company lawyer, Michael Torres. They had brought in legal counsel for this conversation, which meant they expected resistance. "Please, sit down," Marcus said, but his tone had changed. Gone was the pretense of corporate courtesy. This was pure business, cold and efficient. "Sarah, this is a difficult conversation, but it's necessary for the future of the company." He was reading from a prepared script, probably written by Torres to minimize liability. "Over the past several weeks, it's become clear that your working relationship with senior management has become untenable." I said nothing, just watched him perform his rehearsed speech. "Additionally, your unauthorized communications with Yamamoto Corporation, specifically undermining direct communications from the CEO, represent a serious breach of protocol and chain of command." "That's not what happened," I said quietly. "Isn't it? You received a call from their office expressing dissatisfaction with my leadership, and rather than bringing that concern to me directly, you scheduled a meeting to confront me about my communication style." The way he framed it made me sound insubordinate, maybe even mutinous. But I could see the legal strategy: create a narrative where my termination was justified, where the contract clause couldn't be triggered. Furthermore, Marcus continued, "Your resistance to organizational restructuring and your attempts to maintain exclusive control over client relationships demonstrate a fundamental misalignment with company values and direction." Helen slid a document across the table toward me. "This is your termination letter. It outlines the grounds for dismissal and the severance package we're prepared to offer." I picked up the letter and scanned it quickly. They were citing insubordination, breach of protocol, and failure to align with company objectives. Gross misconduct, in other words. They were trying to trigger the exception in the Yamamoto clause. "This is fiction," I said, looking directly at Marcus. "And we both know it." "The documentation is quite clear," Torres interjected. "Multiple instances of insubordinate behavior, unauthorized client communications, and resistance to legitimate management directives." I almost laughed. They had spent weeks building a paper trail to justify what they had planned from the beginning. Every excluded meeting, every reassigned responsibility, every petty slight had been carefully documented to support their narrative. "Mr. Kellaway," I said, setting down the letter, "do you really think Yamamoto Corporation is going to accept this explanation? Do you think they'll believe that I suddenly became insubordinate after 3 years of successful collaboration?" "What Yamamoto Corporation believes is irrelevant," Marcus replied. "This decision is based on your behavior and performance, not on their preferences." But I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Deep down, he knew this wouldn't work. Yamamoto-san wasn't stupid, and he wasn't naive about American corporate politics. He would see this for what it was: a power play that put their partnership at risk. "Sign the letter, Sarah," Helen said gently. "The severance package is quite generous, and we're prepared to provide excellent references for future employment." I looked around the room at these people who had decided my fate in corporate boardrooms and private conversations. 11 years of loyalty, of results, of sacrifice, reduced to a legal document designed to cover their tracks. What if I refused to sign? Torres cleared his throat. "Refusing to acknowledge your termination won't change the fact that your employment has been ended. It will only make the transition more difficult for everyone involved." "Including Yamamoto Corporation?" The silence stretched out uncomfortably. They all knew what I was driving at, but none of them wanted to say it out loud. Finally, Marcus leaned forward, dropping the corporate facade for a moment. Sarah, let me be very clear. You're done here either way. The only question is whether you leave quietly with a generous package and good references, or whether you force us to make this messy. And trust me, if it gets messy, you won't like how it turns out. There it was, the naked threat. Play along with their fiction or face the consequences. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He assumed that I cared more about my reputation than about justice. I picked up the pen Helen had helpfully placed next to the termination letter. For a moment, I let them think I was going to sign it. I could see the relief in their faces, the satisfaction that they had broken me. Instead, I set the pen down and stood up. No, I said simply. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Excuse me? Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. I said no. I won't sign your fictional termination letter, and I won't pretend that this is anything other than what it is, a personal vendetta disguised as corporate restructuring. Sarah, Helen tried, but I cut her off. You want to fire me? Fine. But don't insult my intelligence by pretending it's for cause. We all know what this is really about. Marcus's facade cracked completely. What this is about is your inability to function as part of a team. Your arrogance, your manipulation of client relationships, and your complete disregard for authority. My arrogance. I laughed, and it came out harder than I intended. I delivered the biggest deal in company history, and you're firing me because you can't stand that I did it without you. You delivered a deal that makes you indispensable and the company vulnerable. That's not success, Sarah. That's sabotage. Then I guess you'll find out on Monday morning when Yamamoto Corporation walks away from their $2 billion partnership. The threat hung in the air between us. David looked like he was going to be sick. Helen was frantically taking notes, probably trying to document everything for legal purposes. But Marcus just stared at me with naked hatred. Get her out of here, he said to the security guards. And just like that, it was over. 11 years erased in 5 minutes by a man who couldn't read a contract carefully enough to understand the consequences of his actions. The security guards were professional about it, at least. They escorted me back to my office to collect my personal belongings while one of them watched. Jennifer was crying quietly at her desk as I packed my photos and awards into a cardboard box. Other employees found reasons to walk past my office, their faces mixture of sympathy and relief that it wasn't them. What about the Yamamoto ceremony? Jennifer whispered as I packed the last of my things. That's not my problem anymore, I said, but we both knew it would be everyone's problem very soon. The walk to the elevator was the longest of my life. Colleagues I had worked with for years avoided eye contact. Some offered weak smiles or mouthed sorry as I passed, but no one said anything out loud. Corporate cowardice at its finest. Everyone knew this was wrong, but no one was willing to risk their own position to say so. As the elevator doors closed on my former life, I caught a glimpse of Marcus standing in his office doorway, watching my departure with that same predatory smile. He thought he had won. He thought he had eliminated a threat and consolidated his power. He had no idea that he had just triggered his own destruction. I spent the weekend in a haze of anger and disbelief. Friday's events felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My apartment, which had always been a refuge from the corporate world, now felt like a prison. Every surface reminded me of my former life, business cards scattered on the kitchen counter, dry cleaning from client dinners hanging in the closet, a laptop bag I would never need again. But underneath the shock and grief was something else, a cold, calculating fury that grew stronger with each passing hour. Marcus Kellaway had destroyed my career out of petty jealousy and wounded pride. He had turned my competence into evidence of disloyalty, my success into proof of sabotage. Worse, he had done it with the smug confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Monday morning, I woke up early and dressed carefully in my best suit, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I wanted to feel powerful for what was coming. I made coffee, sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop, and began to compose an email. The address was one I knew by heart, Yamamoto-corp.jp Dear Yamamoto-san, I began, and then I told him everything. Not the corporate sanitized version that Meridian's legal team would eventually try to sell. The truth. How Marcus had spent weeks undermining our carefully built relationship. How he had tried to renegotiate contract terms without authorization. How he had dismissed Japanese business customs as outdated formalities. And finally, how he had manufactured grounds to terminate me in direct violation of the partnership agreement. I wrote for 2 hours, choosing every word carefully. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about honor, respect, and the sanctity of business agreements. Values that Yamamoto-san held sacred and that Marcus had trampled in his quest for dominance. When I finished, I read it through twice, then sent it. Then I sat back and waited for my phone to ring. It took less than 30 minutes. Ms. Chen, this is Kenji Nakamura calling from Tokyo. Mr. Yamamoto would like to speak with you immediately. Of course. Please put him through. The next voice I heard was one I had come to know well over 3 years of negotiations, conference calls, and relationship building. Hiroshi Yamamoto spoke English with precise formality, but I could hear the anger beneath his careful words. Ms. Chen, I have read your message with great concern. Is what you have written accurate? Yes, Yamamoto-san. Every word. There was a long pause, and I could imagine him sitting in his Tokyo office, staring out at the city while he processed this betrayal of trust. Ms. Chen, when we negotiated our agreement, I insisted on your continued involvement because I believed Meridian Industries shared our values of loyalty and consistency. Your termination suggests I was mistaken. Yamamoto-san, I want you to know that what happened to me doesn't reflect the values of the people I worked with for 11 years. This was the decision of one man who prioritized his ego over the partnership we built together. Nevertheless, the contract is clear. Your removal constitutes a breach of our agreement. Yamamoto Corporation cannot proceed with a partnership that begins with broken promises and dishonored commitments. I felt a surge of vindication, followed immediately by something darker. Marcus had gambled with billions of dollars and lost. The question now was whether he even understood the magnitude of his mistake. What happens next? I asked. I will be making a formal statement to your board of directors. Our legal team will review options for compensation related to preparation costs and lost opportunities. And of course, we will be seeking alternative partnerships for our North American expansion. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine even though it was barely noon. In a few hours, Marcus Kellaway's world was going to collapse around him. The board would learn that their new CEO had destroyed the biggest deal in company history through sheer incompetence and arrogance. The press would start asking questions about corporate leadership and decision-making. And Marcus would finally understand the difference between authority and competence. But I wasn't done yet. My next call was to James Mitchell, a senior reporter at the Wall Street Journal who had covered Meridian for years. We had a good relationship built on mutual respect and occasional information sharing. Sarah, I heard you left Meridian. Congratulations on the new opportunity. Thanks, James, but that's actually why I'm calling. There's a story here that I think you'll find interesting. I could hear the shift in his voice, the sharpening of attention that came when a journalist sensed a real scoop. I'm listening. What would you say if I told you that Meridian Industries just lost a $2 billion partnership because their new CEO couldn't be bothered to read a contract thoroughly? I'd say that sounds like front-page material. Want to meet for coffee? We met at a small cafe in Midtown, far from the financial district where loose lips could sink careers. James was everything you'd expect from a veteran business reporter: sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of quiet intensity that made sources want to spill their secrets. I didn't give him everything at once. That would have looked like sour grapes from a disgruntled employee. Instead, I fed him just enough to make him hungry for more. The timeline of Marcus's hiring. His pattern of restructuring at previous companies. The unusual clause in the Yamamoto contract that everyone seemed to have overlooked. This is fascinating, James said, scribbling notes in shorthand that looked like ancient hieroglyphics. But I'll need confirmation from other sources. Corporate he said she said stories are tricky. Check the SEC filings for Marcus's previous companies. Look at the revenue numbers before and after his tenure. And I'd be very interested to hear what Yamamoto Corporation has to say about their decision to withdraw from the partnership. James's eyebrows shot up. They've already withdrawn? Check your sources at the company. I think you'll find that today has been very interesting for Meridian's board of directors. After he left, I sat in the cafe nursing my second espresso and watching the city rush past the windows. Somewhere across town, Marcus was probably in damage control mode, trying to explain to a room full of furious board members how he had managed to lose the biggest deal in company history. But the beautiful thing about consequences is that they don't care about explanations, and my phone started ringing around 3 o'clock. First Jennifer, my former assistant, calling from her personal number. Sarah, oh my God, what happened? The building is going crazy. Security guards everywhere, board members rushing in and out of meetings. And Mr. Yamamoto's people have been calling all morning demanding to speak with you. What's Marcus saying? Nothing official, but word is spreading that the Japanese deal fell through. People are saying it's connected to your termination, but no one knows the details. Next was David Walsh, the CFO, and I could hear the panic in his voice. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you contact Yamamoto Corporation directly about your termination? David, I'm no longer an employee of Meridian Industries. I'm not bound by any communication protocols. Jesus Christ, Sarah. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've honored my professional relationship with a valued client. What you've done is breach a contract worth $2 billion. The board is meeting in emergency session. Marcus is. He paused, and I could hear voices shouting in the background. This is a fucking nightmare. But the call that mattered most came at 5:30, just as the markets were closing. Helen Morrison from HR, her voice tight with barely controlled hysteria. Sarah, I'm calling to inform you that there may have been some irregularities in your termination process. The board would like to meet with you tomorrow morning to discuss a possible resolution. Resolution. Corporate speak for we fucked up and need you to fix it. What kind of irregularities, Helen? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone. But I can tell you that Mr. Kellaway has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into recent personnel decisions. I felt a surge of savage satisfaction. Marcus, who had been so confident in his power just 4 days earlier, was now fighting for his professional life. And what would this resolution entail? Full reinstatement at your previous level, with a promotion to executive vice president and a substantial salary increase. Plus a formal apology from the board and a commitment that this situation will never happen again. They were offering me everything I had lost and more. Marcus's head on a silver platter and the vindication of being proven right. It should have felt like victory, but something had changed in me over the past 4 days. The betrayal had cut deeper than professional disappointment. It had shown me the true nature of corporate loyalty, that it flowed only upward, never down. That competence could be punished if it threatened the wrong egos. That 11 years of dedication could be erased by 5 minutes of wounded pride. Helen, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to decline. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. I'm sorry, what did you say? I said no. I won't be returning to Meridian Industries. Sarah, you don't understand. We're prepared to make this right. Whatever you want, within reason, we can discuss. What I want is something you can't give me, the assurance that this will never happen again. That the next time someone threatens a powerful man's ego, they won't find themselves destroyed by corporate politics. But the Yamamoto deal is over. You can't break trust, Helen. Yamamoto-san made that very clear. After I hung up, I poured another glass of wine and sat on my balcony watching the sun set over Manhattan. Somewhere in those glass towers, board members were screaming at each other, lawyers were drafting termination papers, and Marcus Kellaway was learning that actions have consequences, but this was only the beginning. The Wall Street Journal article ran Wednesday morning with the headline, "How Corporate Ego Killed a $1 Billion Deal." James Mitchell had done his homework, painting a devastating picture of incompetent leadership and broken promises. He quoted unnamed board members expressing grave concerns about recent strategic decisions and included a statement from Yamamoto Corporation citing fundamental disagreements about partnership values and commitment. Marcus wasn't named directly, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines. The stock price dropped 12% by lunch.by Thursday. Other outlets had picked up the story. Forbes ran a piece about the dangers of disruptive leadership in established industries. The Financial Times questioned whether American companies understood the cultural subtleties of international partnerships. And Business Insider published a brutal takedown titled "The CEO Who Couldn't Read His Own Contracts." I watched it all unfold from my apartment, feeling like a general surveying a battlefield from a distant hill. Each article, each stock drop, each industry analysis was another nail in Marcus's professional coffin, but the killing blow came from an unexpected source. Friday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and unmistakably British. "Ms. Chen. This is Victoria Ashford from Blackstone Strategic Partners. I believe we should meet." Blackstone was one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world, the kind of place that advised Fortune 500 CEOs and managed billion-dollar deals. They didn't call unemployed executives unless something very interesting was happening. "I'm listening. We've been following your situation with great interest, particularly your work on the Yamamoto partnership. Our clients are always looking for executives with your combination of strategic thinking and relationship management skills. We met the next Monday at Blackstone's offices, 50 floors above the financial district, in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows that made Manhattan look like a toy city." Victoria Ashford was everything I expected from a senior partner at a white-shoe consulting firm, impeccably dressed, razor-sharp, and the kind of confident that comes from never having been told no. "Let me be direct, Ms. Chen. We have a client situation that requires someone with your specific expertise. A major Japanese technology company looking to establish North American operations. They've requested someone who understands both the cultural nuances and the strategic complexities of trans-Pacific partnerships." I leaned back in my chair, beginning to understand the game being played. And this client would be Hayashi Electronics. Perhaps you've heard of them? I had indeed. Hayashi was one of Yamamoto Corporation's biggest competitors, with annual revenues that made even my lost deal look modest. If they were entering the North American market, it would be with the kind of resources that could reshape entire industries. They're offering a position as Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, reporting directly to the CEO, with full autonomy over North American expansion. The compensation package is substantial. She slid a folder across the table, and when I opened it, I had to work to keep my expression neutral. The salary was triple what I had made at Meridian. The bonus structure was tied to deal values, not corporate politics. And buried in the fine print was a clause that made me smile: no termination without cause, as determined by an independent arbitration panel. "There is one condition," Victoria continued. "Hayashi-san specifically requested that you begin with a project designed to, as he put it, understand the competitive landscape. They want you to analyze why certain partnerships fail and others succeed." The subtext was clear. Hayashi wanted me to poach Yamamoto's business, using my inside knowledge of their strategies and relationships. It was corporate warfare dressed up as market analysis, and the irony was delicious that I would be competing directly with my former company, backed by unlimited resources and insider knowledge, while Marcus Kellaway tried to explain to his board why their biggest competitor was suddenly eating their lunch. When would they want me to start? Immediately. There's a flight to Tokyo tomorrow evening for preliminary meetings. If you're interested, of course. I thought about Marcus, probably sitting in his office at that very moment, trying to salvage what was left of his reputation. About the board members who had let him destroy 11 years of my work without asking a single question. About all the colleagues who had watched my perp walk in silence, too cowardly to speak up. I'm very interested. The next 18 months were a masterclass in strategic revenge. Hayashi Electronics didn't just want to compete with companies like Meridian, they wanted to dominate them. And I was their weapon of choice. My first project was exactly what Victoria had hinted at: a comprehensive analysis of failed partnerships in the technology sector. I spent weeks dissecting the Yamamoto deal, creating detailed reports on what had gone wrong and why. But more importantly, I identified dozens of other partnerships that were vulnerable to the same kind of corporate mismanagement. Hayashi-san read my reports with the intensity of a general studying battle plans. He was in his 60s, silver-haired and soft-spoken, but his eyes held the kind of focused intelligence that had built an electronics empire from nothing. Ms. Chen, he said during one of our Tokyo meetings, your former employer's loss of judgment has created opportunities for those wise enough to recognize them. We will not make their mistakes. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Hayashi would approach the Western partners that companies like Meridian had neglected or mismanaged, offering better terms, more respect, and most importantly, stability. We weren't just competing for market share, we were harvesting the fruits of our competitors' incompetence. Within 6 months, we had signed partnerships with 4 companies that had previously been in Meridian's sphere of influence. Each deal was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Each success was a direct result of relationship building that my former colleagues had either ignored or actively damaged, but the crown jewel came in month 10, when I received a call that made everything else look like practice. Ms. Chen, this is Kenji Nakamura. Mr. Yamamoto would like to schedule a meeting with you and Mr. Hayashi to discuss a potential partnership. I had to set the phone down for a moment to keep from laughing out loud. Yamamoto Corporation, the deal that Marcus had lost through sheer arrogance, was now coming to us. The poetic justice was so perfect it felt like fiction. The meeting took place in Tokyo, in Yamamoto's private conference room overlooking the city. Yamamoto-san and Hayashi-san had known each other for decades, their companies operating in adjacent but non-competing spaces. Now they were discussing a partnership that would combine their resources for North American expansion. Ms. Chen, Yamamoto-san said as we reviewed the preliminary terms, I have been most impressed with your work at Hayashi Electronics. Your approach to partnership management reflects values that are often missing in American business. The deal we negotiated was worth over $3 billion, 50% larger than what I had originally brought to Meridian. But more than the numbers, it was a validation of everything I had tried to build in my previous life. Respect for cultural differences. Long-term thinking over short-term profits. Trust built through consistency rather than destroyed through egos. I walked out of that meeting. I thought about Marcus Kellaway and wondered if he understood what he had really lost when he fired me. Not just an employee, not just a deal, but an entire philosophy of how business relationships should work. I didn't have to wonder long. The announcement of the Hayashi-Yamamoto partnership made front-page business news around the world. The Wall Street Journal called it a seismic shift in trans-Pacific business relationships. Forbes described it as the deal that redrew the technology landscape. And every article mentioned the same detail, that the partnership was being managed by Sarah Chen, the former Meridian executive whose termination had cost her previous company billions in lost opportunities. My phone started ringing before the markets opened. First was David Walsh, my former CFO, his voice hollow with defeat. Sarah, I hope you know what you've done to us. I've done nothing to you, David. I've simply done my job for someone who appreciates competence over politics. The board is talking about bankruptcy. We've lost 6 major partnerships in the past year, all to Hayashi. Our stock price is down 60% since Marcus took over. I felt a flicker of sympathy for David, who had always been decent to me, but it was overshadowed by satisfaction. Meridian was finally paying the price for prioritizing ego over excellence. And Marcus? Gone. Terminated 6 months ago when the board realized what he'd cost us. His consulting now, telling other companies how to optimize their human capital. David's laugh was bitter. The man who destroyed the most successful partnership in our history is now giving advice on personnel management. After we hung up, I sat in my new office, corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of Tokyo that reminded me daily of how far I had come, and thought about the strange mathematics of revenge. Marcus Kellaway had destroyed my career in 5 minutes, believing that his position made him untouchable. But what he hadn't understood was that in a world built on relationships and reputation, burning bridges eventually leaves you stranded on an island. I hadn't set out to destroy Meridian Industries. I had simply taken my talents to someone who valued them appropriately. But the cumulative effect of Marcus's decisions, driving away competent employees, alienating partners, prioritizing control over collaboration, had created a cascade of consequences that no single act of revenge could have achieved. He had destroyed himself. I had just provided the opportunity, but the story wasn't over yet. 2 years after leaving Meridian, I received an invitation that brought the whole saga full circle. Hayashi Electronics was opening their North American headquarters in Manhattan, and they wanted to celebrate with a reception for industry leaders and potential partners. The guest list read like a who's who of American business, including several board members from my former company. But the invitation that interested me most was the one that had been sent to Marcus Kellaway, now running a struggling consulting firm from a shared office space in Queens. I spent extra time getting ready that evening, choosing a black designer dress that spoke of success without ostentation. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman who had turned professional disaster into personal triumph. The reception was held at the Rainbow Room, 6 to 5 floors above Manhattan, with views that made the city look like scattered diamonds. Hayashi-san had spared no expense, and the evening was a showcase of everything his company represented: elegance, sophistication, and the kind of quiet power that didn't need to announce itself. I was networking with potential partners, discussing the future of trans-Pacific business relationships, when I saw him. Marcus Kellaway stood near the bar, looking older and smaller than I remembered. His once perfect hair was thinning, his expensive suit had the slightly rumpled look of a man who bought quality but couldn't afford to maintain it. He was talking to someone I didn't recognize, gesturing with the desperate animation of a man trying to sell something no one wanted to buy. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw the exact moment he recognized me. The color drained from his face, and his conversation partner, sensing the shift in attention, made a polite excuse and walked away. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the crowded room. Then, with the inevitability of gravity, he began walking toward me. "Sarah," he said when he reached me, his voice carefully neutral. "I have to say, you look successful." "Thank you, Marcus. You look." I paused, letting him fill the silence with his own insecurities. "Well, I've been following your career, of course. Impressive work with Hayashi. Though I have to say, some might call it opportunistic. And others might call it competent. I suppose it depends on your perspective." He flinched at that, and I could see him struggling to maintain his composure. The predatory confidence that had once defined him was gone, replaced by the desperate bravado of a man who had lost everything and didn't understand why. "You know," he said, leaning closer, "I never meant for things to end the way they did between us. Corporate restructuring is always difficult, but it's nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" I kept my voice level, professional. "Marcus, you destroyed my career because you couldn't handle the fact that I had built something you didn't understand. You turned my competence into a threat and my success into sabotage. If that wasn't personal, what was it?" "It was business. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made for the good of the company. How did that work out for Meridian?" The question hung between us like a blade. We both knew the answer. Meridian had never recovered from losing the Yamamoto deal. They had hemorrhaged talent, lost market share, and were now struggling to avoid bankruptcy. All because Marcus had prioritized his ego over the company's interests. "That wasn't entirely my fault," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Market conditions changed. Competition increased. There were factors beyond anyone's control." "Were there?" "Because from where I stand, it looks like a very simple cause and effect relationship. You fired the person who brought you your biggest deal, violated a contract worth billions, and drove your most valuable partnerships to your competitors. What part of that was beyond your control?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating, trying to find an angle that would put him back in control of the conversation. But what could he say? That he had been right to fire me? That destroying Meridian had been worth preserving his authority? "You've done well for yourself," he said finally. "But you shouldn't forget where you came from. Without Meridian, without the experience you gained there, you wouldn't be where you are today." It was such a perfectly Marcus thing to say, taking credit for my success even as he stood in the ruins of his own career. I almost admired the audacity. "You're right," I said, and I saw hope flicker in his eyes. "Without you firing me, I never would have realized how much more I was worth." Without you destroying my faith in corporate loyalty, I never would have been willing to take the risks that brought me here. So thank you, Marcus. Thank you for showing me that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is also the best thing." The hope died in his eyes, replaced by something bitter and defeated. "I hope it was worth it," he said quietly. "What?" "The revenge. I hope destroying me was worth whatever satisfaction you got from it." I looked at this man who had once held my career in his hands, who had wielded his power like a weapon, who had believed that position meant more than competence. And I realized that he still didn't understand. "Marcus, I didn't destroy you. You destroyed yourself. I just built something better from the pieces you left behind." He opened his mouth to respond, but I had already turned away. There was nothing more to say. Nothing more to prove. Justice had been served, not through grand gestures of revenge, but through the simple act of being better than the people who had tried to diminish me. As I walked away from Marcus Kellaway for the last time, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. He was a small man who had been given great power and had used it to make himself feel bigger. But power without wisdom is just destruction waiting to happen, and Marcus had destroyed the only thing that mattered in the end, his own legacy. I spent the rest of the evening celebrating with colleagues, partners, and friends who had built their success on mutual respect rather than dominance. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the champagne, filled with plans for future collaborations and shared visions of what business relationships could be when they were based on trust rather than fear. At midnight, I stood on the observation deck, looking out over the city that had once rejected me and now welcomed me back as a conqueror. The lights stretched endlessly in every direction, each one representing someone's dreams, someone's ambitions, someone's belief that tomorrow could be better than today. Somewhere down there, Marcus Kellaway was probably riding the subway back to Queens, wondering how his life had gone so wrong. He would never understand that the answer was simple. He had confused authority with leadership, control with competence, and fear with respect. But that wasn't my problem anymore, and my phone buzzed with a text from Hayosha-san. "Ms. Chen, excellent work tonight. The Samsung executives were very impressed with your presentation. I believe we have the foundation for our next major partnership." I smiled, thinking about the morning ahead, the deals to be made, the relationships to be built. Marcus had taught me an invaluable lesson, though not the one he intended. He had shown me that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's success so complete that your enemies become irrelevant. The next morning, I woke up in my penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park and checked the business news. Buried on page 6 of the Wall Street Journal was a small item about Meridian Industries filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The article mentioned that the company had never recovered from strategic missteps in international partnerships and cited leadership instability as a contributing factor. I felt no satisfaction reading about their failure. If anything, I felt sad for all the good people who had worked there, who had done nothing wrong except trust leaders who didn't deserve that trust. Jennifer, my former assistant, who had been laid off 6 months earlier. David Walsh, who had taken early retirement rather than watch the company die slowly. Dozens of other employees whose only crime had been loyalty to an organization that didn't value loyalty in return, but that sadness was balanced by something else: gratitude. Marcus Kellaway had done me the greatest favor of my professional life by firing me. He had forced me to leave my comfort zone, to take risks I never would have taken otherwise, to discover just how much I was really worth. The woman who had been terminated from Meridian 3 years earlier would have been devastated by the news of the company's bankruptcy. She would have felt responsible, guilty, somehow complicit in the failure of an organization that had defined her identity for 11 years. The woman I had become understood that Meridian's failure was not a tragedy, it was justice. Natural selection in action, eliminating organizations that prioritized politics over performance, ego over excellence, fear over trust. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The caller ID showed a Tokyo number I recognized immediately. "Good morning, Yamamoto-san. Ms. Chen, I hope I am not calling too early. I wanted to discuss the Samsung opportunity with you before my board meeting this afternoon. For the next 30 minutes, we talked strategy, market positioning, and relationship management. It was the kind of conversation I had once dreamed of having with Marcus, focused on solutions rather than blame, on possibilities rather than problems, on building rather than tearing down. When we finished, I poured my second cup of coffee and sat on my balcony, looking out over a city that had once seemed determined to crush me. The morning sun was burning off the fog, revealing the sharp edges of skyscrapers and the softer curves of the park below. Somewhere in that urban landscape, Marcus Kellaway was probably sitting in his small office, wondering where his next client would come from. Maybe he was regretting the decisions that had brought him to this point. Maybe he was still blaming everyone but himself for his failures. It didn't matter anymore. The best revenge, I had learned, wasn't making your enemies suffer. It was making them irrelevant. And Marcus Kellaway, who had once held the power to destroy my career with a signature on a termination letter, was now just another cautionary tale about the dangers of mistaking position for power. My calendar alert chimed, reminding me of my 10 o'clock meeting with the Samsung team. Another partnership to build, another relationship to cultivate, another step forward in a career that had been reborn from the ashes of someone else's arrogance. I finished my coffee, straightened my jacket, and headed for the door. There was work to do, success to be earned, and a future to be built. And that night, as I walked through the lobby of Samsung's Manhattan office building, past the security guards and marble walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected my confident stride, I thought about the woman I used to be. The one who had believed that hard work and loyalty were enough. The one who had trusted that competence would be rewarded and excellence would be recognized. She had been naive, but she hadn't been wrong about what mattered. She had just been wrong about where to find it. The elevator doors closed behind me, carrying me toward another meeting, another deal, another victory in a war I hadn't chosen but had certainly won. 60 floors below, the city pulsed with the dreams and ambitions of millions of people, each believing that tomorrow could be better than today. For some of them, it would be. For others, like Marcus Kellaway, tomorrow would be just another day of reckoning with the consequences of their choices. But that was the beautiful thing about justice: it didn't require your participation to function. It simply was, as inevitable as gravity and as impartial as mathematics. And nothing was ever the same again. What would you do in this situation? Would you have signed that termination letter and walked away quietly, or would you have fought back like Sarah did? Tell me in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on corporate loyalty, professional revenge, and the price of standing up to powerful people who abuse their authority. If you enjoyed this story of workplace justice and strategic revenge, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next tale of someone who refused to go quietly into the corporate night. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead.